Welcome to How You Livin', a transformative podcast featuring best-selling author, inspirational speaker, and minister, Dr. Rick Rigsby. And now, Dr. Rick.
Hello, friends. Thanks so much for joining us. I want to continue discussing a topic I began recently about the value of living every day with a code of conduct. Now, I knew you wouldn't get excited about that until I told you this. Just imagine going through the day without a North Star, without something guiding our behavior. When we don't live by a particular set of values, when we don't live with a particular code, our conduct can fluctuate. It can become inconsistent with our belief system. A code of conduct is like a compass for life. It keeps us headed in the right direction, reminding us of our values and what we're not willing to compromise. Think about it this way. Think about all the things that tempt us in the course of a day. And now imagine not having a North Star to guide us, not having boundaries and limits. Just the slightest move can cause us to go off course, and a great price can be paid. The business world is aware of this. Most organizations abide by a code, whether it's Starbucks coffee, for example, providing employees with what they call a standards of business conduct that helps employees understand how they should act in certain situations. Or whether it's Kellogg's. Kellogg's boasts of a code of conduct stating that the organization loves to promote company culture while clearly indicating how employees ought to act. Hewlett-Packard devotes extensive space to its code of conduct with a website presentation about integrity, including a letter from CEO Enrique Lores stating, quote, "I have always believed that how we do things is just as important as what we do." Codes outline behavioral expectations. Codes offer the proper coordinates for life. Coordinates. As I'm working on this podcast episode, I'm sitting in my backyard in Dallas, Texas, watching planes overhead line up for final approach to DFW International Airport about 30 miles away. Imagine what would happen if pilots flew without the proper coordinates. They'd fly off target. They'd miss the mark. Imagine if you're on a flight from Los Angeles to New York, and imagine the pilot miscalculates and adjusts the headings by just 3.5 degrees to the south. The plane would not land in New York. The plane would end up 200 miles away from New York and land in Washington, D.C. James Clear wrote about this in a fantastic book titled Atomic Habits: Tiny Changes, Remarkable Results. Listen to what Clear stated, quote, "Such a small change is barely noticeable at takeoff. The nose of the airplane moves just a few feet. But when magnified across the entire United States, you end up hundreds of miles apart." Whoa. If you don't operate daily by a code of conduct, you may stray off course without even realizing it. In an age of moral relativism, the waters of social consciousness are murky, to put it mildly. A generation ago, we had a good idea of what constituted right from wrong. It wasn't an ethnicity thing. It wasn't a political thing. It was rooted in the wisdom we learned from a generation of parents who survived the Great Depression and multiple wars. This podcast is not an indictment on a particular belief system, whatever your beliefs. A compass is required. It's required to stay on course, to make sure you don't compromise from your beliefs. A set of values that guide us morally and ethically and spiritually is just as critical as influence, resilience, and wisdom. In fact, without a code, I would argue that influence, resilience, and wisdom are built on shaky ground. Codes of conduct are as old as America herself, a country established on biblical principles. Codes serve as both a philosophical and pragmatic reminder of what's important to us, of what's at our very core. I participated in a lot of football recruiting weekends while on the staff at Texas A&M University. We'd welcome prospective players and their families to visit campus and check out our football program. It was always lots of fun. It was exciting to watch these young men contemplate one of life's most critical decisions as to where they would learn and where they would play for the next 4+ years. But I recall one particular recruiting weekend. We were showing families around the weight training facilities. As our strength coach was receiving questions, one parent asked, "Tell us, what do we need to do to get our son as strong as possible to play Division I football?" Without skipping a beat, the coach said, "You must develop his core. If his core is not strong, the rest of his body will not be strong." Friends, those are powerful words. Words that transcend the physical dimension of life. Developing our moral core is critical to sustain success. The stronger the core, the stronger the convictions of the person. But yet, many of us begin our day without checking in with our core. I've always been fascinated by codes ever since my years as a Cub Scout. Back in the 1960s, when every den meeting we'd recite the honor code that we live by, the Cub Scout Pledge. Ever since, codes have been an important part of my life, from the codes of a soldier taught to me by my dad, a World War II veteran, to the codes of good sportsmanship taught by coaches and teachers, to even a television code, if you can believe that. That's right, a television code from the National Association of Broadcasters. Now, you might be surprised to know this, but television actually was guided by a code at one point. Today, there's standards and practices and procedures. Back when I was a young television reporter in the 70s, it was the Television Broadcasters Code, and all of us reporters were well aware of the ethical standards for broadcasters. Let's just say that was a different day. Lately, I've been fascinated by a different kind of code, by a code that was practiced among cowboys, cowboy ethics, and the code of the Old West. This fascination was brought on as I read a book a few months ago, a fantastic book by author James P. Owen. The book is titled Cowboy Ethics: What It Takes to Win at Life. Here are a few key themes from the book. Our world is in desperate need of heroes today. Second, cowboys are heroic. They live by a code. They show us what it means to stand for something. Third, honoring the code is the hallmark of a genuine cowboy. Fourth, the code of the West points us back to our basics and why it's important to practice basics. And fifth, core values include courage, honor, and self-reliance. These are the core values of the code of the West. Here's Owen's central argument. In an environment of corporate greed and scandal and compromise, the cowboy code shifts the focus from "is it legal?" to "is it right?" These questions are rooted in the days of the open range, when there were no systems of court, when the cowboy code of the West was the only civilizing influence, and every cowboy knew the rules. Now, these were some rough riders, right? They practiced quite an interesting lifestyle. They packed guns, they caroused, they smoked, they drank, they cursed, and they were not very politically correct, but they followed a strict code of conduct. For example, you didn't steal a man's horse. You never disrespected a lady. You never took the last water without refilling the water bucket. There was a time to eat. You knew where to leave your hat inside or where to place your gun inside of a home. And you never passed by a fence in need of repair. I love what Owen did in his book. He took the essence of the Cowboys Code of the West and created 10 principles that any of us can apply to our lives. Here they are. I'll go slowly. I'm hoping that you'll make note of at least one of these. 10 principles from the Code of the West, Owen said, that any of us can apply to our lives. Number 1, live each day with courage. Number 2, take pride in your work. Third, always finish what you start. Fourth, do what has to be done. Number 5, be tough, but fair. Sixth, when you make a promise, keep it. 7, ride for the brand. 8, talk less, say more. 9, remember, some things are not for sale. And number 10, know where to draw the line. Friends, I've thought about these principles a lot over the last few months. If you don't have a code, I would encourage you to use just one of these principles to begin to establish your own code of conduct. For example, I love principle number 7, ride for the brand. I've often taught businesses that the goal is more important than the role, that the big picture is more important than the momentary discomfort of an employee. Ride for the brand is important to me. More important than personality differences, more important than conflicts, or whether you think your leader is competent. Now, these are serious issues, and if these issues persist and require a change, you move on. But if you choose to stay, you ride for the brand. In other words, I used to always tell our football players, you don't play for the name on the back of the jersey, you play for the name on the front of the jersey. Friends, my hope is that this podcast has encouraged you to establish a code for your personal conduct, something that will guide your behavior and speech every single day. In the words of James P. Owen, quote, once you embrace the idea of living by a code, it becomes clear that individual character, not your job title or your lifestyle or your bank account, but that individual character is the true meaning of who you are. Well, that's going to do it for this episode. Until we meet again, this is Dr. Rick asking the most important question I can ask. How you living?
Are you ready to make an impact in your world right now? Do you want to stop existing and start living your best life right now? Dr. Rick wants to give you the first chapter of his best-selling book, Lessons from a Third Grade Dropout, absolutely free. Just go to www.rickrigsby.com/free gift to get the print or audiobook right now.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.